5 tips of what to do when you don't understand the Spanish speakers. Welcome to Hola Spanish, bienvenidos a Hola Spanish, soy Brenda
y yo soy Romina.
Somos tus profesoras de español de Hola Spanish. Today we're going to have a look at 5 tips that you can follow when your Spanish is not great, so you speak basic Spanish and you don't know what to do when you don't understand Spanish speakers. Tip número 1. Tip number 1. So the first tip that I want to tell you and that I want to share with you today is what I call 5 to 10 minutes of nada. This is what I call the 5 to 10 minutes of absolutamente nada. So what I want you to do is when you start speaking with one person, one Spanish speaker or a group of people, what I want you to do is to give yourself permission to not understand absolutely nada, nothing, for at least 5 to 10 minutes. And I know that 5 to 10 minutes sounds like not much, but believe me, when you are in a conversation, 5 to 10 minutes is going to feel at the beginning like a really long time. And this is particularly stressful because you feel that the other person is there waiting for your response, or that you need to be able to understand and to exactly respond and to show that you are understanding, you are following the speaker. And that situation could be very stressful. So what these 5 to 10 minutes of nada does is when you give yourself that permission, when you allow yourself not to understand for the 5 to 10 minutes of the beginning of a conversation, that really lowers your levels of stress and anxiety, because you know that you have given yourself that permission to actually go like, let's relax, let's see what we can pick up, let's focus on the conversation, permission to not understand anything. When you relax, you will actually start to notice that you start to pick up things, and that you have time to adjust to the person's tempo, vocabulary, accent, so many things to take into consideration when you first start speaking with a Spanish speaker, particularly if you are a beginner.
The second tip that we would like to suggest you is to actually tell the others that you're learning Spanish and that your Spanish is still not very good, okay? So it will allow others to say like, okay, so when I talk to this person, I have to actually look at them directly into their eyes, talk to them slowly. It will make them aware over the fact that you cannot follow the whole conversation. So they will be kinder to you, if that makes sense. So I think it's important for you to actually tell them as soon as you can that Spanish is not your first language, that you're learning, and that you need a little bit more patience when being talked to. So what you can say in Spanish is, lo siento, estoy estudiando español, yo no entiendo mucho. Lo siento, soy principiante. ¿Puedes por favor hablar más despacio? So you can use all these phrases to ask people to slow down, to be a little bit more vocal, and to speak a little bit slower for you so you can understand Spanish better.
Tip number 3 is to practice Spanish conversation as much as you can. I know that it's very stressful to actually be in a conversation in Spanish if you're a beginner. Practice makes perfect. So the more that you practice, the more that you put yourself in that uncomfortable situation, the more that you're going to start to pick up and the more comfortable you'll become. And also the more accents or different people that you speak to, the more you're going to get used to listening and hearing Spanish. Instead of trying to avoid at all costs talking to Spanish speakers because you fear that you won't understand them, actually do exactly the opposite. Put yourself in that situation, in that uncomfortable situation at the beginning, and you'll see that you're gonna start speaking and picking up a lot more straight away. Tip número 4. Tip number 4. This one is, can we speak Spanglish? So a lot of our students and a lot of beginners come to us and tell us that one of the biggest thing for them is that when they get to practice, they have a lot of amigos who actually speak Spanish, but they're English speakers, and mostly of these Spanish friends, they also speak English, and their English is better than their Spanish. So they feel very awkward and very weird to having to slow down the conversation, go back to the basics, speak like a monkey and Tarzan, you know. And so they feel very embarrassed about that, and they don't know how to overcome that situation, so they end up speaking English because their friends can actually speak English better than they can speak Spanish. So my suggestion, my tip number 4 for you would be, why don't you try to maybe speak Spanglish? That way you can practice the words and structures that you know, and the words and structures that you don't know, maybe say it in English, so that the conversation keeps moving forward, you still have that communication effect, and you also get to practice the little or a lot of Spanish that you already know. Then eventually you'll start to notice, there's a lot of theories and there's a lot of people who don't like the whole Spanglish situation. I have seen it myself with my personal experience as a Spanish speaker speaking English, and then with other students as well, that eventually you'll start to notice that you end up speaking more Spanish than English until you absolutely completely switch and speak Spanish straight away, instead of having to help or get help from the English language.
Tip número 5, the 5th and last tip that we want to share with you is that very awkward moment when you realize that you're not understanding a word, but then this other person keeps going and going and going and talking to you in Spanish, but you're not understanding a word they're saying. You have no clue about what the conversation is about. So you just want to stop them for a second and tell them, I'm sorry, I don't understand, right? And we all get a moment where we don't really know when is the right time to actually ask this question, just to stop them and say, look, I'm so sorry, I'm not understanding what you're saying. Should you do it as soon as you don't understand? Should you wait a little bit long until they finish expressing themselves and just say it at the end? When is the right moment to say this? Okay, when do you think is the right moment, Brenda?
Well, like I said, first remember the tip number 1, give yourself 5 to 10 minutes of nada. So once you have gone through that 5 minutes of 1 to 10 of nada, then there's also a different situation. So if it's a one-on-one person, we'll actually give you some tips what to say, how to say, I'm sorry, can you speak slower, I don't understand you, when it's one-on-one. So that's an advantage. If it's one-on-one, sometimes a lot of people fear, well, if I don't understand, where is the conversation going, right? So think about it. The one-on-one gives you that opportunity to tell the other person, you need to speak slow, you need to understand that I'm a beginner, and then that will be a completely different dynamic. If it is a group that you're listening to and you're part of a conversation, even better. That way you don't have to, well, it's not better, but it's different in the sense that, well, perhaps you have more, you can give yourself more permission to be more relaxed for those 5 to 10 minutes of nada, because the other people are interacting, they're talking amongst them, they're not really, unless they ask you for your opinion specifically, which you can use some of the phrases that we'll share with you right now, then in that case, you can also take your time to understand and jump in the conversation. Muy bien, so now we're gonna give you a few examples of when to interrupt. You asked me when is a good moment. I think perhaps when when you notice that you're not understanding and the other person continues going, you don't want them to finish their whole spiel and then to go like, I'm sorry, I didn't get any of that, you know, because it could be frustrating for the Spanish speaker. So maybe halfway you interrupt and just always say lo siento, I'm sorry, and then explain what the situation is. And by interrupting them halfway, I believe you give yourself the time to try to understand things in context, and then you also give the time to the person to rephrase or to try to re-elaborate and speak again about what they were saying, but in a more basic or slower manner.
Mm-hmm. So, the things that you can say are this. Es lo que me pasó. Estaba por tomar el autobús y llegó en un momento dado tarde y se detuvo en el tráfico y yo no sabía qué hacer porque estaba llegando tarde al trabajo.
Lo siento. ¿Podrías hablar más despacio, por favor?
Sí. Bueno, yo estaba por tomar el colectivo.
Muy bien, amigos. So those are the 5 tips of what to do when you don't understand your Spanish speakers, and what to do, what to say, how to react. And I really hope that you found these tips useful and easy to understand and follow. In the comments down below, we would love to hear from you. Which is the tip that you can actually start implementing right now and that you can start to put to use today? If you want to learn Spanish with us, we have Spanish lessons and online courses. I will leave you the link in the description box.
If you are new to our YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe to get notifications so you don't miss our video lessons. You can also follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you want to learn some basic phrases right now, you can sign up to our free weekly Spanish lessons. I'll leave you guys the link in the description.
Muy bien, amigos, that's all for today. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next class. Adiós. Hasta luego.
Onda, mala onda. Onda, mala onda. Onda, mala onda.